And how was your relationship to your dad? I mean, how was that masculine presence in your life? How was he, and how is he as a man in your life?
Well, the relationship that we have today is very different than the one that I remember as a child. The one that I remember as a child was growing up with a father who was Vietnam vet. He earned a Purple Heart in Vietnam. And when he came back, he was a drill sergeant. So I grew up in the house with a drill sergeant of the United States Army. His father before him was in the military, and his brothers were military. So I grew up in a house with a lot of discipline and a lot of strict rules. And, you know, it was his way or the highway. There were rules, and you stuck to them. You didn't question them. You didn't argue them. You just did what you were told. And if you did not, there were consequences. I grew up in an era where it was legal for corporal punishment in school. I can remember my parents signing, you know, the permission slip at the beginning of the school year, and we'd get SWATs in school with rulers, you know, for rule breaking. You'd get the option. You can get the SWATs here in school, or we can send a note to your parents and let them know what happened, and they can deal with it. And often it was, you know, you prefer the few swats with the ruler in school as opposed to the ass whooping you get at home for showing out in public and in school, which you knew better than doing and embarrassing the family.
Right. So during those formative years and after that horrible event with babysitters, you had this anger inside of you. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you didn't tell anybody about it, but you went into sports. You had some kind of outlet for that energy.
Yeah. I had sports as an outlet for energy and a way to mask. You know, sports was for me a very good way to mask, you know, who I was and what was going on, and bury those sorts of things deep inside. Because I was, you know, a fair to middling athlete. I was usually one of the, if not the best person on my team. So that's what people saw when I was engaged in athletics. They saw the prowess on the field. They saw the ability on the field, and that was lauded and applauded. And that's what people engaged with. And that was cool for me because I didn't have to engage with them. And when I say I'm talking about the real person didn't have to engage. The persona was engaging, and that's who people were engaging with. So that was another outlet for me to be able to hide.
All right. So they didn't get to know the real you and the different emotions and parts of you that was lying underneath the persona.
No.
Did anyone? Did anyone get to know that person?
No. Like I said, you know, my dad was in the military, and we're talking about at that time a Cold War era. So we did a lot of moving. You know, every 3-4 years or so, I'd be in a different place. So, you know, I'd say I was in Germany for 3 years. I remember being in Germany, and we lived in Noyon. We were there for a couple of years, and then we moved from there to Kitzingen. So I can remember schoolhood friends and associates, but you're not around really long enough to develop lifelong relationships because everybody's always moving. Your parents are always being stationed someplace else around the world. So you get to know people, you get to like people and hang around with them, but it's nothing in depth.
And also something happened that prevented you from moving on with your sporting activities. What happened?
Me and a friend took his mother's car for a joyride one evening. We decided we were going to take, I was 14 at the time. We stole his mom's car. You know, they call it joyride, but it was a car theft. We stole his mom's car and took it for a joyride and wound up wrecking it. Wrecking a vehicle that had a for sale sign in the window. She was in the process of trying to sell it. So my parents split the cost of what she was trying to sell it for with her. as their amends on my behalf. And so that summer, I had to spend doing, various chores around the house. And I was restricted from playing baseball that year. So the sports were off the table. I was on, summer-long punishment. There were no sports, the activities like that. So I made the choice that summer to get involved in the gang lifestyle. And it was an easy transition for me because a lot of the people that were in the gang that I lived in the neighborhood that I lived in, I knew them already. I was already associated with them either through school or we played sports together. So these were people I had been around for a few years, and I knew what sort of activities that they were involved in. I was familiar with them. Some of them, I could even utilize the word friend for whatever that's worth to 13, 14-year-olds. And so the transition for me was real simple. That was another place to hide. That was another place where I could create a persona. That was another place where I could show something to others that was outsized and grandiose, and they would look at that and they would respect that. And I wouldn't have to show who I was. I could hide. And I could, have, what I used to think was respect and honor.
And what was your position in the gang? What did you do on a daily basis?
Well, at that time, 14 years old, there was not really a position that I had. It was for the most part fairly fresh to a lot of us. I was in Sacramento at the time, and Bloods and Crips were founded in Los Angeles. So it was fairly new in the early 80s to the Sacramento area. So we were dibbling and dabbling in things that people from Los Angeles had brought up, moved up, and introduced to us. So it was, I was engaged in narcotics trafficking, gun running, burglaries, robberies, assaults. If it was illegal, we were into it. I was into it. And because of my brain, because of the way that my brain functioned and my ability to problem solve and come up with things quickly, it garnered me respect. My ability to think garnered me a lot of respect, because when you think about criminals are not the smartest people. We do dumb stuff. Criminals do dumb stuff. That's why we get caught. That's why prisons are full. And oftentimes there were issues that would come up, and then there's a discussion. Okay, well, how do we do this? How do we go about this? How do we get this? And I always had the answer. I always had an idea about how to do something, how to accomplish something, how to overcome something. So that, was something that garnered me respect and a position as someone who was seen in a positive light in that world.
And what was the last gang activity? I mean, what was the actual event that led you to be incarcerated?
The actual last event that led me to prison, because I was incarcerated multiple times before I actually went away for life. I was incarcerated as a juvenile for false imprisonment and possession of stolen firearms. I was incarcerated for burglary. I was incarcerated for car theft. And those were all before I turned 18. I did, from the time I was 14 to the time I was 18, I did 3 years of incarceration. I don't think I was on the streets in the community more than 6 months straight at any one time, from the time I was 14 to the time I was 18. I was incarcerated in some shape, form, or fashion. The crimes that netted me a life term were attempted murder and kidnapping for purposes of robbery. And I had gotten out of the California Youth Authority, which is young people's prison, 21 days prior to getting arrested on those charges. I got out October 10th, 1990, and I was arrested on November 1st, 1990. And the next time I saw civilization was June 18th, 2014.
I mean, what I'm thinking about as I hear you speak is there's something here about order and chaos. and I mean, so sports, going into sports is you join a group, there's a clear set of rules, and there's an us and a them, right?
Yes.
In the gang as well, there's a set of rules, there's a group, and there's an us and a them, and a clear purpose to what you do. And the same I imagine in prison with the groups and the gangs there.
The groups, the gangs, the inmates, the guards, there's a us and there's a them.
Yeah. And if you carry a lot of chaos inside of you, maybe you look for a sense of order on the outside. Maybe you look for something to hold on to, something that makes sense, like a set of rules or a narrative or a purpose, a group purpose. And that helps you to navigate through that chaos that you carry inside of you.
It definitely was the case for me. Having structure negates that chaos. Whether it's real or imagined, it negates the chaos because there's a focus on something else. There's a focus on codes of conduct. There's a focus on rules. There's a focus on order. There's a focus on routine. There's a focus on the way that things should go. There's a focus on making certain that everything is in line and in place the way that it should be. And that is something that can distract me from looking at the chaos that is my internal life.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking out at what's going on everywhere else and trying to put everything in place everywhere else, as opposed to looking inside and put those things in place.
And when was the first time that you actually looked inside to that chaos?
The first time I actually looked inside into that chaos was when I was sitting in the hole. And because I'd been to the hole, I'd been in solitary confinement a few times before that. But because of my history in prison and the things that I had been engaged to up to that point, including the offense that netted me that solitary stint, I was placed on what was called stand alone, walk alone. And what that is you have what's called classification, and the classification committee, that's the warden, the captains, all of those sort of people, had determined that I was such a bad actor that I was not fit to be around other human beings, even other inmates, even other people who were in solitary confinement. Most people in solitary confinement, when you go out to recreation, you're with other people. You're in the hole, but you're with other people. I was in the hole and I would go out to recreation by myself. I would live in a cell by myself. I was in a 2-man cell, but they would not put another human being in the cell with me. They would not let me out on the yard with other people. And I was serving this term in Corcoran, California, in the SHU in Corcoran. And SHU is an acronym for Security Housing Unit. And the building was split into 2 halves. One side is SHU, Security Housing Unit, and the other side is FU, PHU, Protective Housing Unit. And Charles Manson and Sirhan were serving time in the PHU side. And they are 2 of the most notorious people in California prison lore. Charles Manson, the famous Helter Skelter crap, and Sirhan assassinated Bobby Kennedy. And they were allowed out around other people when they went out to recreation. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, here you got Charles Manson, who by his hand never did anything to anybody. He just word of mouth convinced other people to go and butcher other people. And they're letting him out around other people. But I can't be out around other people. For me, that was an epiphany that something about this is wrong. Something about where I'm at and the place that I've reached in my life, this don't make sense. if I then reflect on how I was raised, the household that I came from, you know, the advantages that I had in life that other people in my same situation did not have in their life, it was very obvious to me that the choices that I had been making to that point were ass backwards. And I didn't know what the change would look like, but I knew that I needed to start investigating what was going on, or without a doubt, I was going to die in prison.
And that's what you did when you went into the Inside Circle program.
Yes.
So, I mean, I bet there's a difference in viewing your chaos or investigating your chaos alone and solitary and doing that in a circle.
It's very different, because investigating it in solitary, I was still a criminal. In my mind, I was still a criminal. And my real reason for walking away from the gangs was so that I could get to a lower level prison and escape. And I knew that continuing to be involved in the things that I was involved in, the spotlight was going to continue to be on me as someone who was viewed as a leader amongst his peers. And the gang still involved in, you know, selling drugs, jumping on people, doing all of that sort of stuff. It was going to be very difficult for me to get down to a lower level prison where I could then hatch my, you know, ingenious scheme to escape from the California prison system. So I had to be alone. I had to be someone who was flying under the radar. That was my initial goal. And along the line, Inside Circle found me, and I was thrust into a position to then begin to look at what was really going on with me.
Tell me about your first experience with Inside Circle, of that breakthrough experience.
Well, the first breakthrough experience my first experience with Inside Circle, I wasn't personally doing work. It was when I was sponsored in, and after the process of sponsoring myself in and going through around the check-ins, seeing a man do work. And I got the opportunity to sit and hold space with a man doing an extremely deep piece of work that I had been around for a decade on various prison yards. And I thought that I knew him or was familiar with him to a certain degree. And seeing just his raw emotion and his pain and what he had been through, and the wails and the screams that were coming from, I have no idea where, deep inside of him, and seeing other men that I was also familiar with from other places hold and support that man and go into that place with him and then bring him back in a tender, loving, and caring way was huge to me. I had never witnessed anything like that in my life. And then me stepping onto the carpet and doing my work and discovering where my trauma was, because that was something that I had buried in myself. You know, the account that I recounted to you about being molested, the very next time I talked about that and even was able to tap back into that and realize that had happened was sitting in Circle. I was 34 years old. So that was something that, you know, when it happened, a piece of me got locked away and blocked off and walled off. And it was behind, you know, brick walls, steel, iron, barbed wire. It was behind all sorts of stuff. And it got cracked open on that carpet. I didn't even, you know, if somebody would have asked me when I was 25, if something like that had ever happened to me, I'd have said, hell no. And in my mind, I would have believed that. That's how far deep it was buried.